The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Andrea McMaster.
When you go to a museum to view art, do you ever feel overwhelmed not knowing what to do? When you're looking at a painting on the wall, do you wonder, what am I supposed to be seeing? How am I supposed to understand this piece of work? Well, welcome everybody to this edition of Consider This. I'm Andrea McMaster. We're glad that you could join us. This week on Consider This, we're focusing on the visual arts in the state of Nebraska especially, and we have two guests that I want to introduce you to. Dan Seidel, who recently held a position at the Sheldon Memorial Art Gallery, but now is going to be at the University of Nebraska at Omaha as assistant professor. Beginning this fall, he will teach modern and contemporary art. So we're so glad to have you here today, being especially on the grounds of the place that you're going to be working here coming in the fall. And Mark Masuoka, who is the executive director and chief curator of the Bemis Center for Contemporary Arts, and we're glad that you could be here too.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you here. I really want to hear a lot about Bemis, especially what the mission is for our community, and for folks who've just never had a chance to be there in its location close to downtown Omaha. They'll be able to get a little piece of that. Especially since this is a statewide program, the folks in western Nebraska can appreciate what some in the Omaha community are doing. So let's start in just talking about visual arts in the state of Nebraska. I'm sure we often think about New York City or some of the major cities as really being the places that art is happening. What do you think about in the state of Nebraska? Do we have a good sense of the visual arts here in our community?
Well, I think we have. I think we're developing that. I think it's surprising the number of significant artists in various disciplines or working in various media that we have in the state. I think the task that Mark and I have and others have is developing an audience for that activity, so that the artists stay in Nebraska and can build careers in Nebraska. And so I think the important thing for us is to develop that audience who will take that seriously and to live with and encourage the artists that are in the state.
Mark, how would you characterize the visual arts in our state?
Well, I think what Dan mentioned, this is a great opportunity. It's a great time in the, in the city and the state for exciting things are happening. I think what Dan did at the Sheldon and what he's going to do at UNO is that it complements what we do at the Bemis Center and the fact that we are attracting talent to the state. People are coming in for our exhibitions, they're coming in to participate in our shows, participate in our residency program, but also giving us the chance to be able to support artists within the community. So I think that's a really big and exciting thing that I think that's happening, and there's a lot of energy in the city right now.
You mentioned that you see that the art scene has changed significantly in the past several years, that it's becoming a more younger artists who are moving to Omaha. So that has to be encouraging.
I think so. I think artists coming. I think what I've noticed is that artists have come to the state from under the auspices of doing a residency at the Bemis, for example, and have stayed or have developed ties. And I think that's something that as Mark was saying, in terms of attracting talent, that's something that we want very much to do. And so to have a vibrant audience that's in place when artists from around the country or around the world come and do a residency at the Bemis or other residency programs in the state, that they can interact in an audience that takes seriously what they're doing and understands what they're doing and can give the kind of feedback that's necessary for an artist to grow.
Talk a little bit about being at the Sheldon Memorial Art Gallery. That's on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. And you were there since July 1996, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, I was there for 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about what that was like, some of your maybe memorable experiences, and now moving on to being an assistant professor.
Well, what I most valued was developing a contemporary art program and to develop situations in which artists from around the country would come to the Sheldon, and I could share my relationship with that artist and that artist's art with the community. And so I wanted to simply I've had great experiences working with artists in the past decade, and I just wanted to share that with as many people as possible. And so to bring in artists that that would give our community an opportunity to see work that they may not see in the state, but then also to introduce the artists to the state of Nebraska. And the work I've done with Enrique Martinez Celaya, a Cuban-American artist who has become very, very close to the state of Nebraska, I guess you could say, and very much likes Nebraska. Nebraska wasn't on the map for him until he and I started working together, and he has a fond affection for the state and deeply respects what we're doing. Recently I worked with an Omaha artist. Well, he was born in Omaha and he lives in Chicago, Chris Ware, a comic artist. And I just was very much interested in his work. I enjoyed him personally and wanted to create a project, work with him on a project in which other people in the Lincoln and Nebraska area could enjoy him and enjoy the work that he has. And so over the 10 years, that's what I've wanted to do, is to expand that opportunity for people to experience artists working around the country.
Because probably, and I'm just speaking here in terms, but people won't go searching for a great artist, won't know about them unless you're bringing them to them, unless you're really, really plugged in the art scene. You don't know what's out there and what to appreciate. So really, I know that's both of your jobs in looking for these great artists and I was able to see that last one that you had.
That is one of the roles of the art museum too, and or presenting organizations to be able to bring exhibitions, to the public, to expose them to something maybe they wouldn't normally be exposed to.
Do you think that there's a long way to go to really educate the general public about the visual arts? Like I'm thinking, at the Bemis Center, do you see the same people come in and out of there for the different exhibits? How do you bring in new people? How do you bring in new groups, new crowds to see art that they'll probably appreciate if they get there?
Well, that's been one of our goals. I think new audiences has a lot to do with understanding not only what your community wants, but I think also the context that it's creating. So, how we respond as curators and how we create exhibitions, we're really looking for an opportunity to talk to the public about, in this case, contemporary art, bring in artists that are interesting, have big ideas, something to say about contemporary culture or just their experience, their creative process. And I think through that process of presenting their artwork in let's say even in a formal situation like a gallery or a museum, the public has a chance to interact not only with the artists but also with their artwork. And I think what that does is it starts creating curiosity. It starts creating interest in things that are maybe unique, something they haven't experienced before, and then that sense of discovery that they get when they walk into a space and see something for the first time, and then you see that light bulb go off and their eyes open up and you go, that's building new audiences. That's creating this sort of depth of curiosity in people.
Do you have anything to add to that, Dan? Because art is so personal, so it's so different for everybody.
Well, I think it's important to emphasize the fact that it is personal and that one's initial response to it can be the basis upon which to build that relationship. I mean, I think there's an assumption that from the general public standpoint, whatever that means, is that there's some secret that some expert knows about the artwork that the general public doesn't know. But I'm willing to bet that my gut response or Mark's gut response to an artwork is going to be very similar to the gut response from a person from the general public. It's just we have a framework in which that gets filtered through and understood and interpreted in some ways. But for the general public to understand that experience, that when that light bulb goes off, that light bulb is going to be the same for you as it is for me or for Mark. It's just how we go about interpreting what just happened and why we can't stop thinking about that work of art, or why we continue to go back and look at that work.
I think that's a good point, because I do think for a lot of people that visual arts is intimidating, because you're looking at something going, wait a minute, why is that on display? I don't see, what am I supposed to be seeing with this? Why is this special? Or what am I supposed to see in this work? And just wondering, I mean, I feel that way when I go and looking at different pieces of work, wondering, what do the professionals see in this piece? What am I supposed to be seeing? I feel like this is, way above my head. And so letting people know that it really can be personal, and it is, the art. Do you think art is subjective and should be?
I tell people all the time when they walk in to an exhibition, it is about sort of, it's not necessarily trying to figure out what's going on in the gallery, but it's really trying to give yourself the chance to have this experience, to see what it means to you, and maybe even a directly emotional kind of response to it, as far as, even if it's in a formal respect, a shape, a form, a content, something in it, whether or not it's the story, or the painting is telling a story, or the sculpture is creating a situation, or how it's filling the space. It's a very sort of like intuitive reaction to a piece of art. And I think, when you approach art that way, then you're not really being put into a context where you have to be an expert or talk about what exactly is going on there, but it's an honest response to something. And I think when you get to that point, then I think we can all sort of just have a very straightforward response and conversation about what that object or what the reaction to that object or situation or installation is.
Well, I want to show some pieces of art here in just a minute, but first, these are all from the Bemis Center for Contemporary Art. So why don't you just kind of give a little background on the mission and what you're there for, and
Sure.
Why it's so important to have something like this in a community.
Well, the Bemis Center has been around for 25 years, and I think we've had very straightforward mission to support exceptional talent. And I think what that represents for us is we do it in 3 of our different programs, from our International Artists in Residency program, and basically what that means is artists from all over the world come and live and work in our facility for about 3 months. We support them while they're there. We do it through our exhibition programs, where we have 3 galleries in our first floor, about 10,000 square feet of exhibition space. And we do it through our community arts programs, which are basically our outreach program, where we can take contemporary art and bring it right into the community. And, like I mentioned, this is a really exciting time to have Dan come here to Omaha and actually be, he's already a pretty significant curator in the United States. And I think what that brings for us is the chance to be able to just keep advancing this idea of what art represents to people, and what it can do for for our either community or even for our advancement of culture, within our state. And I think that's, it's, when I heard he's coming, I mean, that was one of the most exciting things I heard in a long time. So.
Well, I want to hear some of Dan's goals, but let's look a little bit about some of the Bemis art pieces. We have the Public Art Project.
Your project launching, yeah.
Yeah, so this is, you do public art projects. So
we
there's
do public art projects.
3 of these to show here.
This is the project that we're doing in collaboration with the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce and Allegiant Health, who's our lead sponsor. But the first piece you saw was Les Bruning. This is a piece by Gary Day, and these are both examples and parts and pieces of some works in progress, sculptures. It's the big O with the exclamation mark. You're going to start seeing them. They're already starting to be installed throughout the city, and then we're going to have the big launch on June 12th. So after June 12th, you're going to see them, 22 sculptures, 24 artists, distributed throughout Omaha.
That's going to be really fun.
Yana Raymakers, who's working on the piece. And basically this has to do with the comfort of that artists feel, and the support that the artists feel within the community. So a lot of artists had a chance to really reflect their, how they feel about being an artist in this community. And it's a wonderful project. We're having fun.
This one is the most recent Art for Omaha Public Art Project, Discover Omaha, right? That's the title of this one. It's an 80-foot photo montage. So what is it of the city, different places of the city?
It is. It's we partnered with 16 community groups, and basically what we did is we distributed cameras to all the groups, had them shoot images of objects that were influential and had an impact on their life. We did a panoramic view of the Omaha landscape, and then we put the pictures into this photo montage, and it's over 4,000 images of just people having experiences in their city and what it represents to them. And
That was neat to see. This
Yeah.
is one from one of the current shows.
these are current shows, Immigrants, which is a show that's been curated between the Danish Museum, and Danish Print Workshop, about the experience that how artists interpreting the concept of immigration. So
Okay, and this is for another one from one of the current
show opening up
shows.
on Friday,
And-
this Friday coming up.
So this
and
piece
this
is
is John
dance or
Garrett.
drawing. Okay.
And it's a mixed media. He's a nationally known fiber artist, but the works that he's exhibiting really have this great line between sculpture and painting, and he uses wonderful materials in very unusual ways, and he's a pretty incredible artist.
And then we have Through the Sausage Factory, Eyes and Ears and Nose and Mouth. This is again from one of the other current shows. This is Martin Morehouse.
This, it's a fun show, but I think it really shows the depth of maybe Martin was a former resident in the program about a year and a half or so ago. All his work is always meant to be interactive, either with sound or motion, and in this case, you literally crawl through the sculpture, and when you get to the end, you press a button, and this thing inflates, and basically you become the object being sort of propelled through this thing. And it's a wonderful show. It's great for families and
Extremely
people are gonna love
creative.
it.
Well, and that's another point, getting the kids and getting the kids out there. So, and finally, we have an image for this is Bemis Underground. The piece is untitled.
This is work by Nolan Treadwell, and one of the artists presenting in the Bemis Underground, which is a program that we started about 2.5 years ago to invite curators to come and present projects in our basement level gallery in the Bemis Center. And what we really wanted to do was create a space where we could support local curators and then also bring in groups of artists to participate in their exhibitions. And it's been a wonderful chance for us to provide this space for these new projects, and it's been really exciting. It's been received really well.
And we'll go ahead and show some of the photos of the artists in residency program
Sure.
from that too, and talk a little bit about why that is so beneficial, because you're bringing people from all over the world, the
Yes.
artists, to the community. So then again, it's giving people in our community a way to be able to see and hear and actually come and meet some of these folks from all over the world, the artists all over the world. So we've got Andy.
Indy Palsovic, who's originally from Sarajevo, and Indy lives in Los Angeles now, and he was an artist resident here about 2.5 years ago. He just concluded an exhibition at the Bemis Center, and this is just a shot of maybe him working in his studio, and just to give people an idea of what some of these studios look like in the second floor of the Bemis Center. The average studio is about 1,200 square feet. They average between 1,200 and 2,500, so they're large, ample spaces, wide open. What we hope is, space is beneficial to creativity and allow artists to do what they need to do to present. This is Sabine Raja, an artist from Pakistan, and why I love this photo is that it's a total contrast to, or a different way that artists work. And I think when you see process and you see, here you have an artist working on a large space, building big pieces, and then you have an artist working on a miniature painting, sitting in their studio on the floor, set up in a very sort of traditional Pakistani method of using watercolors. And, it's just like I said, it's a really great contrast to show that artists just don't work in one way, they work in multiple ways.
That's neat.
And Sonia Kim, who, we have a number of artists who work with new media, with video. And so when they come to the center, they are either actively shooting footage for video, or they're editing, or they're creating new projects. And again, just to show that, we have artists that work in painting and sculpture and photography, and then also artists that are working in mediums that are, like I said, new mediums such as video and film.
Okay. This is a
And,
shot of Studio 5.
Last
yeah.
shot, this is Studio 5. This is our large painting studio. The work that's represented here is Ian Harvey. And Ian was a resident here a few years ago, and it just, again, shows the type of space that we provide for the artists when they come into residency.
Dan, now moving on from your role as curator to being an assistant professor, what do you hope to bring to your students? What do you want to teach them mostly about art for them to be able to take away?
Well, I've felt that the 10 years that I've spent as a curator in the contemporary art world will bring a different perspective for the students, and so that when I'm teaching an art history survey class and the students are beginning to first understand what art is, that it's that my understanding of art has been shaped not just by the textbooks and by my scholarly work, but being out into the field and living and working with artists and the important role that museums and presenting institutions play. And so that aspect, that understanding, I think, and that breadth of experience, I want to be able to share with the students. And I feel that the students that I'll be interacting with are students that are either going to be artists, or they're interested in practicing art, or they're going to be part of the general audience. They're going to be part of that audience that Mark and I want very much to be brought into this world of art. And so the hope I have is that I can instill this kind of passion and interest in taking art seriously, whatever that means for the student.
You have 3 children here today who are actually watching the show being taped, and I want to delve into that too. And how, you said one of the interactive exhibits that through the sausage factory, for children, getting them there, getting art into their hands at an early age. I mean, why is that so critical and important to give them a crayon to start drawing at an early age, to kind of get that thinking that this is something that's important as well?
Can I give it a shot?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. I think it's about looking at things that we are often trained to overlook over time. And I think that what makes a child and an artist very similar is that they both look at the world in ways that our culture and society can tend to de-emphasize. Always looking at the overlooked things, looking at the cracks in the sidewalk, looking at just various configurations in the sky, or noticing color, or just things that in the ways that our lives are molded and shaped, we don't take seriously anymore as adults. And so I think that artists teach us to see and to pay attention to details and things that might not be that significant, that end up, I think, being quite significant. And so I think for the perspective of my children, I'm not teaching them any great truths. I'm just initiating them into a world in which I take seriously looking closely at things. And so I want to nourish that looking closely at things for them as well, and to draw that connection to living artistically and to living in a kind of a joyful way. And how much that includes art is in some ways will be up to them. But I'm trusting that I'm opening up at least an avenue for them, that they don't feel that it's shut off and it's completely intimidating to them.
Well, I loved this. I found that creating art is a fine way for children to make choices and solve problems. Every step involves making a decision. What color to use, how to make a line, what size to make something. So with every choice, the object becomes more of their own. And what great skills to learn, but through the art process. Any suggestions of really how we should get our children involved in the art, Mark?
Well, what happens is I think, when you expose a young mind to something that maybe they haven't seen before, or something that just, you're generating something that becomes ultimately the spark in their life that gets them interested in the arts, and all facets of the arts, from music to visual arts. And then you're forming opinions, you're forming ideas about what the world represents, how they can interact with it. There's great case studies through education about how the arts positively affects students in their judgment and their decision making. And I think all those arguments are wonderful. I think what it ultimately proves is something that we've known, that artists know, is that art has this huge impact on people's lives. And the impact it has on children is amazing, because they're forming opinions about their world around them. And I think the best way, I have a 15-year-old, and what we did is we just took her to art shows. We took her out to museums. We traveled. When we traveled with her, we always made sure that there was some aspect. Now, ultimately, my wife is an artist also, so I think she really didn't have a choice to be in this situation.
She had to like it. But I can hear a lot of 15-year-olds saying, "That's really boring, Dad. Yeah. I don't want to go to an art gallery."
Exactly.
And running around instead of walking quietly and looking at the art pieces. So I mean, how do you make it exciting? That has to be something that parents have to be creative in doing that too.
Yeah, I mean, we used to play. You have to make it fun, and I think I think when it becomes a job to go to a museum for a child, then ultimately, you know, it's not going to be as fun. But you know, so we used to walk around and we used to play a game called Art Critic, and we'd go in there and we'd pick what we like and what we don't like, and we had to explain why we didn't like it. And some of the insights that I got from my daughter were quite perceptive and actually pretty right on the money. And I thought, you know, how interesting that all this basic understanding is coming out of a child about something probably just very visual as opposed to conceptual. And it taught me to sort of like break it down a lot more about how I respond to art, and that it is an intellectual process, but it's also an emotional process. And I think to go with your intuition on how you react to things, and I think that's the connector that's made with children, is that they are honest. And they will give you their opinion about what it is. And I think that's not only refreshing, but I think that's a good way to set up a learning experience with your children about how to express themselves, and that it's okay. And I think that's a really big lesson learned for a lot of kids.
And talking about if Nebraska creates great artists, I know, Mark, you had mentioned that you can't teach someone to be an artist, but you can only teach them the skills. Explain what you mean by that.
You know, and you know, that's a great connection with kids too. You can't just dump your kids into an art class and expect them to come out being exceptionally creative and talented. I think it's what you do to get them to that point, to nurture something that maybe is already in them. And what I meant by that comment is that, you know, going through art school, you know, I think you learn really quickly that nobody was there to learn how to be an artist. They were learning to be better technically, as far as proficient and how to think about things intellectually, and actually ultimately find out where they fit within this greater art world. And I think and maybe even better understand what they wanted to be as far as an artist. So, you know, the whole fact that that spark, that thing within people, you know, you can't you can't learn it. It is something that has to be. It can be nurtured, it can be supported, but you ultimately can't teach somebody how to be an artist.
Anything to add, Dan? We only have a couple seconds
Well, and I think
left.
it's that nurture and support that is what's so attractive about the potential for Omaha and what it's able to provide, the institutions, the organizations, the opportunities for artists who are learning the skills, who are beginning to develop what it means to be an artist, to be able to see and to be able to see and to be able to see other artists, to be nurtured by generations of artists and people to take the arts seriously. I think that's very important, and that bodes well for the city.
Good way to end the show. Dan Seidel, Mark Masuoka, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for tuning in for this edition of Consider This.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.